Greetings and salutations, all you gorgeous individuals. It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you fine folks for day 3 action recap from the bracket stage. And first day we get a pair of best of fives. And let me tell you, Mark, do both of these series ever deliver?
Yes, we got the double schedule coming on through finally. Got this MSI 2 best of 5 stacked up, and yes, the fireworks still delivering up in Canada for MSI with what the action that we had going on. And the day kicks off with that type of fireworks, with that type of action going on, with Koi and our Canadian hero Jojo Pyun stepping out against Knight. And then later on, you had T1 Faker, the classic, the unkillable demon god, going up against the young kid in Hong Q. Let's see what we had.
And we start with that T1 series that breaks the mold of the 3-1 result that we were getting game in and game out. And listen, if you weren't believing in the Oysters being legit before this series, I take you to games 3 and 4 in this set, where they not only games 2 and 3, where we not only make a series for CFO, but we get to match point. And Mark, they dismantle T1. They made T1 look like Hanwha Life, what they did during playoffs. That second game, 16k gold lead, 24 kills to 3, and 0 turrets for T1. Zero.
I'll throw the final 4 games of this series into that impressive category from what we had with the Oysters. And yes, this one, even to someone like us and the people that are paying attention, that are praising and recognizing that the Oysters are a serious contender when it comes to these international events, they have proven that this region and this team, this iteration, has the skills to get it done, to be a challenge. This still beats it by any expectation. You might have thought, okay, kind of like everyone else, maybe you'll get a game, you'll find a way to shake things up, but it'll still be a controlled 3 wins from T1. They'll move on through everything else. Anything but. This was certainly a real test, a real challenge, and one of these ones that comes down to some of that experience, some of these big-time clutch moments that T1 has had to get through the best of teams in the world to win the World Championship in the last couple of years. This was a phenomenal series, and really, yes, the Oysters deserve all the recognition and respect after this one, even on the losing end of it.
I think usually you see T1 get dismantled in the fashion they do in game 2, and you're fully expecting a reverse bounce back of an angry T1. But it was the Oysters, just even more angry, and they really, this one dive bot lane in this third game just gets Doggo's Caitlyn completely out of control. And eventually, I think we said 3 pentas for this event, Doggo locking up the first one of MSI so far and has basically a perfect Caitlyn game.
And this is a guy who has been at that type of level of performance that has generated international attention, that has grabbed it at events like this before. But it has been a little bit of a while since Doggo has been able to contribute this type of way, to have these type of impressive performances and really put it together one after the other, and hang in a series like this type of one was impressive from him. I think you're also looking at the role that the top lane duo played for this Oyster squad and how that changed things up. And, even if they weren't always the main focus point of what was the driving force of the Oysters in this game, the changes, the differences between the two of them was throwing T1 for that bit of a loop, a bit of a change-up, whether it's Doran individually in that top side or it was everybody later on.
And truthfully, we'll get to the 5th game. I would have liked to have seen Driver come in. They had been swapping. Even if CFO was winning a game, they were making swaps. So losing game 4 with rest, I would have loved to have seen Driver get the start, especially now in hindsight with how Doran kind of manhandles that matchup. But before we got to that 5th game, we've got to highlight Honkyu was an absolute menace on the Cassiopeia in that 4th game, and really it came down to the impeccable Kyria Poppy ults to keep that Cassiopeia out of these team fights.
And we talked about it the day or two before about Poppy and this pick and what it can represent, even if your composition isn't so much of this over-the-top egregious choices into it as far as dashes and whatever, that mobility, that removal of people and options from a fight and that wall that she can provide, that is the Poppy that is, and with a playmaking player like Kyria that can has that vision to go through and use it at these certain moments and certain ways at fights. That was a big difference maker. I like you bring up Hong Q on the Cassiopeia in that game 4, because that game 4 was one that was looking off to the races for T1 for so long. This was absolutely going to book us right to Silver Scrapes, and it should be the dominant one. Anything but, and it really did help set up just how close, just how tense that 5th game was for so long, even with some stellar performances. Doran, someone you mentioned early into this one, I think channeled a little bit of those memories of going up against Zeus, turning him, getting that father syndrome out there and really getting that clutch factor for a game 5 when it really does matter. And I like to see that for T1.
And in that 5th game, I think at one point it was basically a 5K gold lead for T1. Over 4,000 of that individually was in the pocket of Doran. And I know Jace versus Ornn is obviously a massive favorable matchup for Jace, but not to that level, because the Ornn was never able to tank anything. And despite some good team fighting out of CFO, this still ends up being the plot armor fully activated for T1 and is their most dominant win in game 5, as Faker gets a little bit of revenge on the Orianna as well, because let's face it, most of this series, Hongq was beaten up on the GOAT.
And that's not that Faker wasn't really playing well either. He was involved in a lot of things that were going right for T1. He was making his plays here and there, these type of things. But yes, Hongq was delivering it. He was generating his advantages. He was making sure that he was a factor within a lot of these team fights as well. And that is something that we got to mention and appreciate, because this certainly is a level up for him individually. A player that looked, we saw him at first stand, very green, still very fresh, but so much potential, talent, you could tell with him. And if you could use these experiences early on to help mold and rocket your career, you're going to be in a really good place. He goes back to the LCP, dominates with the Oysters, and comes back to this event and makes a statement, I think, with this type of performance with the rest of the group of the Oysters against T1, against a legend in Faker.
And Hongq and also Doggo, absolutely world-class level. Guma was pretty irrelevant in the couple of games that the Oysters ended up winning. Obviously had his, statement in game 5, but still, the 2 carries for CFO, absolutely world-class level. Now, pretty clearly they look like better than any of the Western teams to the Oysters, and T1 gets their rematch from last year's World Finals against BLG, where Faker said, it should be good, but I think today was the harder matchup, and Guma's saying they're going to relive the nightmare of World Finals. So T1's not sweating BLG.
I'm frankly surprised to see a little bit of trash talk, and again, it's still in that zone of friendly, banter type of trash talk.
That's as far down trash talk as Faker will ever go.
Exactly, but I love it because Guma he sees this and he's like, I'm like everybody else, a little bit surprised to see some heat come from Faker, and he goes, I'm gonna double it down for you, brother. Live the nightmares of the past. Oh, baby. A little bit of extra salt in the wound, or maybe an extra little bit of bulletin board material as well for a BLG team where you bet no matter what situation it would be, you'd be circling an opportunity to get revenge, to have an opportunity once more time against T1, specifically this roster and the history that you have against them. It really is one of these ones, you're right about the Oysters, kind of respecting them more than the Western teams at this point, where I'm looking at the way things are going to split up, and you're going to have Gen G and anyone's legend, the battle of the best of the LPL, the LCK at the very top. That one was going to be a classic. And then, of course, BLG T1. No, you don't even need the list of reasons that could go on forever why that one's going to be a banger. Guaranteed, must be there. But then you're looking at the losers bracket, and I'm seeing, FlyQuest G2, of course, classic, NAEU. We love to see one of those. Hopefully it maybe matters for something more than just one win type of thing. And that's what I'm getting at with the next one, Koi and the Oysters. When you're looking at the 3 Western teams down in this losers bracket and then the Oysters there, you got to prove that you're at least competitive or better than the Oysters at this point, because one of those teams, two of those teams that I talked about up ahead, they're getting knocked down to this losers bracket, and you're going to be fish food for those big sharks if you're not proving that you can at least hang with the Oysters at this point.
And obviously how both KOI and BLG got to that point. KOI, I feel, was very different than the other Western matchups in FlyQuest and G2. FlyQuest had moments against AL, but KOI was competitive in this series. There was really only one stomp that they had no business winning. We should have been talking about a Game 5 against BLG. They have a near 6K gold lead in this fourth game, and then there's really 3 key points that happen. There's them jockeying and ultimately losing position over Baron, but that's fine. They instantly pivot, get the Dragon Soul. That's obviously permanent. People always debate that trade, but you got Dragon Soul, no worries. But then there's a fight that breaks out before the Baron buff runs out, where Mirwin's a little too far forward, doesn't flash, just gets blown up instantly, and then the final part is on delaying JoJo's back. There's no wave clear for MKOI. By the time JoJo is finally able to get back into the base, the game's over.
Which, let's talk about on in the first place. He was on in this series. I'm sorry for the very easy layup of a punt that is to go with that one in the setup, but man, he was so good. And this has been someone that I think individually has not really been as impressive as when BLG has been at that ultra elite level, that one where they are without question the dominant force within the LPL. But I think that On really was that factor today within that series. In lane, out of lane, he was making sure a lot of these plays were happening and setting things up, protecting his guys. I think that he was really one of these factors. And then, yes, you go back to it, the advantages that you had in that type of trade and situation. I think the explanation was simply about, what positioning at this certain situation. Don't want to flip, don't want to give an opportunity where you're gonna have to force your way in type of thing. We'll take a trade. And normally, you know what? Actually, okay, you can live with these type of trades. You can find a way to really, dial it in and find what is the advantage of the trade and whatnot. But it really doesn't matter when you do take one of those fights when that advantage is still there. And that's because, yes, Baron is going to outweigh that soul buff and benefit at that point, and very much so. You see the advantages that come through fighting with the minions and everything else. An unfortunate end for KOI at the end of it, because this did deserve to push to that decisive Game 5, a Silver Scrapes type of finale.
And it did feel a little bit like when KOI had this gold lead, they were maybe playing a little more tentatively passive because, it's Game 4 against BLG on the way to Game 5. So I get that being something. But overall, again, a competitive series out of them. JoJo, listen, Knight was insane this series, but JoJo more than held his own. He was getting praise from Knight afterwards. They haven't had to focus on laning and side lane pressure so much recently, which is the ultimate praise to him, really. And again, despite the loss, you were just praising On, but this was really a battle of supports, and Alvaro had a fantastic series, and this guy is well on his way to the best support in Europe if he's not already there.
And again, you're going up against On, who has been at times, even with some struggles, one of the best supports of the last 2 years at the competitive scene. So if Alvaro is anywhere close to that in matching it and being able to be a factor himself for this KOI team within a series and within a head-to-head like this, you like to see that type of progress. You mentioned JoJo Pyun, compliments from Knight in this type of situation, acknowledging the type of pressure, the type of player he is, and what it took to contain him in certain moments, and the type of focus for the squad. You still got to build off of this if you are KOI. You need to find a way to keep moving forward through this event, showing more tenacity, more high-level skill and execution for this team, because this thing, outside of the Game 2 composition, which was really, perfect and perfectly executed, I think, by this side of KOI, there are areas where you could nitpick about it, and I think it's maybe less about what KOI is getting, it's what you are letting go on the other side, because I think still going so much after the Ahri and the Annie, yes, I know those are those big ones for Knight, you're still having to deal with things like that Silas, which is ripping and roaring through like a, whatever super high-end blender and some of the mushiest fruit that you have ever seen in your life. Holy cow.
Even after being put down early, Jojo had a great laning phase, hit like a 20 CS lead, and then you have this big gank, it's like a 4-man goon squad that takes down Jojo, and that's all Knight needs to get back in the game.
Yeah, and that's all he needed to take off from that point off and leave the solar system with the type of damage and type of skyrocketing that he was setting up in that game. At the end of it, you're stepping away still with some positives for KOI. It feels a little bit hollow because you don't get to that 5th game where you felt like you deserved to have that type of decisive ending in that regard as opposed to the 4th one. But you're still moving on, and I still think, again, that challenge that I talked about for this losers bracket still contains KOI in that regard for showing that you are better than the Oysters as BLG moves on for our destined historic rematch against T1.
And listening to the KOI players after the match, they didn't seem down at all. I think they knew the mistake that went wrong in Game 4 and were confident they should have had a Game 5. Who knows what happens in Game 5? So the confidence is not shot whatsoever, which is great. And really, I'm sad that one of the Oysters and KOI are leaving because I feel like both of them deserve to be here a bit longer.
It's a little bit, strange with this one because I'll include FlyQuest and G2 within this one. It feels sad having to send someone away from this MSI at this type of point because it has been so fantastic. You've had these best of 5 series, right? Even if they're going to 4 or whatever it is, but you're having these games that go the distance and you're seeing these competitive fires from all these teams. That's not all that far apart. And I mean that in the sense that I think there is that separation. You have the ultra top end, right? You're looking at the Gen G down all the way to BLG, whatever you want to look in that up winner bracket. And then you're looking at that losers bracket, and it still is that situation of, no matter what you want to knock on EUNA, they are going to be a challenge and should be up to that level for the Oysters. And if the Oysters are at the challenge level of being able to push a T1, that means anything can happen in one of these best of series. And I think that is the exciting opportunity.
Already delivering still in like the first couple days of MSI, some absolute banger series that have by no means been stomps, even if they've been somewhat convincing fashion. So super excited for the weekend to kick off way more, and we'll be back to recap all the action afterwards. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, gorgeous individuals. Thanks so much for hanging, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.